It's Monday, December 2nd. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast. And it is a hell of a day to talk ball. I hope you all had a hell of a Thanksgiving long weekend. Hopefully for some of you out there, just a great slate of football on Thanksgiving, Black Friday in the mix, and Sunday was absolutely no disappointment in its own right. We're going to get to everything that happened on Sunday here on the show, but as you all know, we start every Sunday recap show off with a little solo recap of the Sunday night football game before Andy Behrens joins me later on. So we got to talk through Bills 35, 49ers 10 here in a little care, don't care style recap. What we care about from this game on the Bills side of things is that this Buffalo team reminded you tonight that they just have so many ways to win. I know that kind of feels strange to say that on a night when the Bills won their 5th straight AFC East title, but I really think that week 13 and this little reminder that we got here showed us that this is a particular group that feels a little more different and dynamic and versatile than some of the previous Bills teams. And we'll unpack this mainly via what they did in the run game, because the Bills have had a good defense and they've had a premier quarterback, one of the most talented and most gifted quarterbacks in football for the vast majority of the Sean McDermott era as they won these 5 straight titles. We saw both of those at play on Sunday. I mean, the defense was great, although it's kind of hard to parse out their particular impact on the game versus what the hell was going on the San Francisco side, which we'll get to in a little bit. But still, it's a good defense overall. Maybe not one of the most crazy, fun, exotic defenses in the league, but I think McDermott and Bobby Babich have overseen a pretty good remake on that side of the ball. They've gotten some good play out of some guys like Greg Rousseau, a lot of talented players on that side. Defense is still good. And we know Josh Allen is the man. I mean, he might be the MVP of the league this year. He threw a damn touchdown pass to himself, threw a pass to Amari Cooper, who threw it back to Josh Allen. So Allen gets a no catch touchdown reception. Kind of hard to, he scored 10 to 12 fantasy points depending on your format on that play on his own. He's awesome. He was awesome in this game, even if he only completed 13 of 17 damn pass attempts. Who cares? It was still another great Josh Allen performance. He was awesome on the ground. He had the rushing touchdown. Josh Allen's the man. We all know that. But what's more exclusive to this Bills team, and this is something that I'm proud of this show. Like, Nate has brought this up a ton. We've talked about this over the course of the show. This Bills team quietly transitioned into a gap-based run team last year under Joe Brady. In the passing game, things weren't too different last season between the Joe Brady and the Ken Dorsey playbook. But what was different was that the Bills started to lean into more gap-based runs, more man concepts, more duo runs. And if they've doubled down on that identity in 2024 overall, week 13 provided a chance for them to push all the chips in the middle and go all in. With snow falling all over the field, with snow basically throughout the entire game, that was the difference for Buffalo. James Cook was explosive in this game. Typically, it's been, James Cook gets a big rushing lane because the offensive line blows open a hole in one of these gap scheme runs, and he just takes it down for an explosive play. In this particular game, in the first half alone, he had 9.2 yards after contact per rush. Next Gen Stats notes that Cook accumulated 102 yards of his 107 yards overall on plays with jumbo personnel, and he now leads the NFL in rushing yards and rush yards over expected on such carries. Look, I loved the Bills of 2020, 2021, 2022, but imagine some of those teams leaning on opposing physical teams. The Niners, for all their flaws, they're still a physical football team. Leaning on an operation like that with heavy personnel packages and running to win, that would be unthinkable. And Cook obviously wasn't alone in doing the damage. If you were like me and really rooting for James Cook in this particular game for fantasy reasons, you didn't love that backup Ray Davis scored the opening Bills touchdown. And his stat line is obviously influenced by the fact that the Bills were pulling starters in this blowout loss late, but he still averaged 6.3 yards per carry in the first half. He's not the same type of runner that Cook is. They're a little bit different, but he is just as good of a fit for this gap scheme rushing attack. I think as of this morning, Davis, when I looked at it, was only rostered in 30% of Yahoo leagues. Yo, wake up. That should be 100%. There should not be a single fantasy league in America, in the freaking world, on this planet, in the solar system, where Ray Davis is on a waiver wire. Because if Cook missed time for whatever reason, no freaking knock on wood, the whole deal, Davis would be an RB1. That's how good this rushing attack is, and that's how well he fits it. So, look, seeing this run game play out in a weather-based contest, I just think it's really critical. I think it's such a big deal for this Bills team. This has been present all year. This is not a new development, but this was something of like a statement and announcement to the world that this is what the Bills have been for a minute now. Great to see. Even the passing game in this one felt a little more at you, right? Again, I'm a Stephon Diggs guy, but that was an offense that was mostly vertical shots, outside the numbers, down the sideline, stuff like that. Obviously, damn, Gabe Davis is one of your top receivers. You're going to lean into that type of stuff when the passing game is structured this way. This is like they're throwing at you passes to Dawson Knox, Khalil Shakir, the whole deal. So this Bills team feels very different, feels a little more equipped to win in these cold weather games, which again, I know that feels crazy because they've won 5 division titles in a row. It's not as if they needed a new dimension, but this is what good teams do. This is what great teams do. Teams that win consistently do is they get to a point where they've outlived one identity and they move on to the next. They can retain their master's degree in one study. They add another major onto it. That's what this Buffalo Bills team has done. That's what this rushing attack is for Buffalo and why that feels so important headed in towards the playoffs, which the Bills will be participating in for the 5th straight season. Let's talk about the Niners here. What we don't care about is what the Niners were. And look, every week, I think has felt like a funeral for the San Francisco 49ers, not to be dramatic, but it's felt like that basically every week. And it's just more and more leaves the table, becomes different for San Francisco. But I will say there were moments on Sunday night, especially in the first quarter, when I thought things might go a little differently. I thought we might be talking about perhaps a little more competitive game than 35-10. When James Cook scored his 65-yard rushing touchdown, this game was only 14-3. But that's because, look, the Bills are ready for this game. They were ready to lean into the type of power rushing attack that we just talked about. But I think the 49ers were equally ready to lean into it. Christian McCaffrey had 7.6 yards per rush in this game, 7 carries in the first and early second quarter. He had a couple of targets, receptions as well. I would say that for the first time since he returned to the lineup, he looked kind of close to the explosive player that we're used to seeing. Well, as you all know by now, he had his final carry of the evening and what might be his final play of the 2024 season with about 12 minutes left in the second quarter. Kyle Shanahan said after the game they fear this is a potentially season-ending PCL injury. So the season from hell just continues for the San Francisco 49ers. And once McCaffrey left the game, whether it was emotional, whatever, the floodgates just seemed to open. The Bills stormed all over the 49ers with little resistance. I don't know that they were going to win this game just because McCaffrey's out there, just because they were going to be able to run the ball. But once he was gone, the zombie 49ers just kind of returned, and that's really the operation they've been on balance this season. Look, it's at some point the season's going to end. They're not going to fire Kyle Shanahan. None of that stuff's going to happen. That's not like a serious thought here. But this is going to be a tough month plus for San Francisco the rest of the way, because they're just basically playing out the string. They're 5-6. They don't matter in the course of this, the rest of the season. They just don't have enough good players on offense. Their defense has never been good enough to account for that. And I don't know what they're going to look like next year. They're probably going to pay Purdy. Trent Williams is 38. They have so many dudes. Excuse me, I misspoke. They're 5-7 after their loss tonight. They just don't matter in this season. They have so many dudes that are kind of past their prime, right? Kittle's getting older. Deebo Samuel has like 8 fantasy points over the last 3 games. he hasn't had a stretch where he's been under 25 yards from scrimmage for 3 straight games. We're living in that stretch right now. And that's been it's been building to this for San Francisco. So I don't know what the 2025 Niners look like, but that's the next time I'm going to be interested in them as a team when we're in 2025. Because for the rest of 2024, they just don't matter. They do not matter. And that is where we're at with this team, which is unfortunate because it felt like things were going to go this way. If we're being honest, I think the funeral procession began for San Francisco to continue kind of a painful analogy like in the offseason, but it's just been apparent over and over again, especially the last month or so, that this is the way we're trending with San Francisco. And again, in 2025, we could talk about the Niners again as a serious team, but for the rest of this year, they're just a zombie team that's playing out of string. All right, with that, let's get into the rest of the games from Week 13 Sunday slate with Andy Behrens. Let's get to it. Joining me now, as he does here every Sunday evening for the recap show, it is Andy Behrens, looking fresh-faced, looking full of football, full of life. Andy, what's going on, buddy?
Yeah, I've got that post-coaching change glow today. Yeah, things are good. We had a good afternoon of football. We had a bunch of great games. We had some very close games that weren't necessarily great games, but it was a fun afternoon.
I thought we had a pretty electric Sunday of football here, followed up by 4 pretty interesting holiday games, which we're not going to do like full recaps of the Thanksgiving or Black Friday games, but we are going to have a little section where we maybe get a few things off of our chest about those games at the very end of the pod. But before that, we're going to do things as we always do here on the Sunday recap show. We break the games down into 3 sections: the games we care about, the games we sort of care about, and the games that could have been an email. And like I said, we have a jam-packed schedule here. I thought all of these games were pretty interesting to talk about, except maybe some of those email games. Some very wide-ranging and maybe big-picture takeaways, Andy, to get out of a lot of these games. Perhaps no greater than the first game here, the biggest game going into the slate, which was Eagles 24, Ravens 12. This did not turn into the competitive, kind of back and forth conference to conference affair that we thought here, because Andy, I think it's pretty clear at this point. I'm not saying they're going to win the Super Bowl. I'm not saying that they'll be hosting the Lombardi or anything like that. But right now, as we sit here on December 1st, it does seem pretty clear that I think the Eagles are the best team in football.
Man, that defense is so good, right? That's really been the thing, and we've talked about that over the last couple of weeks. I was a little bit slow to it because they had a stretch of games where, based on strictly quality of opponent issues, you don't know how much is the defense and how much is just the friendly schedule. This was just a stellar performance against Baltimore. I will say, Baltimore, don't shortchange me my Isaiah Likely tight end touchdown at the end of this thing. Yeah. I needed it. The Ravens do get to 19, so it looks a little bit closer than it was, but an almost entirely meaningless score, except for some of us needed that one in a big way. That score was so meaningless, and we can leave this mistake in that I did read the score wrong. It was Eagles 24, Ravens 19, and I frankly, there were so many other players on the Ravens that I wanted that touchdown to go to for my own personal reasons, that I guess I just wiped off the Isaiah Likely 7 seconds left in the game 11-yard touchdown. Yeah. But I mean, this game was great. And like Lamar still kind of sort of came through fantasy wise, right? Decent enough passing stats. He sacked 3 times. He was harassed a lot. Secondary played great for Philly. I mean, they are, when you consider some of the injuries that Detroit is dealing with right now, obviously Detroit a game ahead. The Bears could have, had they pulled out a win that they maybe should have on Thanksgiving, they could really have thrown the NFC into chaos, right? We'd have I think 3 10-2 teams. But Philly just looks so good. That the young players on that defense are looking great. Obviously Barkley's great. Obviously AJ Brown is great. AJ Brown now 9-0 when active this season, undefeated. Just a terrific, really fun game overall. Almost anybody that you needed stats from delivered. Derrick Henry doesn't, no rushing score for Derrick Henry this week, but it was a fine game. Cooper DeJean, with a hellish tackle on
Yes.
Derrick Henry late in this thing. Like Iowa legend Cooper DeJean just like picked him up and threw him down. Derrick frickin' Henry. Nobody does that. It was pure disrespect. Philly's a dangerous team.
Yeah, I thought I was gonna have to be the one to bring up the Cooper DeJean open field tackle, but obviously because he is an Iowa legend, as you said, you perfectly knocked that one out of the park there. Yeah, Cooper DeJean is listed, sub 200 pounds, 6 feet. I have had the pleasure of conversing and chatting with Derrick Henry many times, actually, over the course of the last few years. Big freaking fella. Okay. Like he's listed at this, that, or whatever. That's one big ass dude. So for Cooper DeJean to just, like you say, just drop him in the open field like that, super impressive. I thought that just seeing that play just kind of encapsulated like what's going on with the Eagles right now, which is just they have so many young defensive players, particularly defensive players that have just changed the course of this roster, because this time last year was when we were right in the middle of the Eagles slide, when it felt like all right, they're a year past their window. Something is beyond stale on defense. We've got Matt Patricia, dude. Matt Patricia was like taking over the defensive play calling duties this time last year, or right around this portion of the season. And they've got all these guys that are way past their prime and some of the young players that aren't quite hitting their stride yet. Now we're 365 days later. Vic Fangio is at the controls. We've got Cooper DeJean breaking out. Quinyon Mitchell is kind of in and out of this game, but he's been a player who's been super effective. Jalen Carter, according to Next Gen Stats, played 70 of 71 defensive plays for the Philadelphia Eagles. The only play he came off was the Isaiah Likely meaningless touchdown at the end. That it was nearly a second game. It was nearly a second complete game of the season because he played 100% of the snaps in week 11, which is insane because we normally don't see defensive players like this just on the field for every single snap and dominate the line of scrimmage, which I thought this was yet another moment for Carter where he was dominating the line of scrimmage. So again, it's just when you have a great, I guess we can call it 2 drafts back to back on defense, because Carter and Nakobe Dean were part of the draft last year, but especially this class this year, you just have guys that just, man, you can really change the course of your franchise when you just get a game changing group of young players in here, and I think that's what the Eagles have done.
Yeah, they absolutely have. Just a I don't know. I feel like this probably isn't the first time that I've said something was a signature performance or signature win for Philly, but man, this was a great one. The NFC playoffs are going to be, the playoffs generally are going to be so good this year, but I just can't wait for the late January games. I'm ready for it right now. Philly is just looking so good, and they are. Again, they're one of those teams where we kind of fantasy wise, we sort of know where the ball is going to go. Yeah. There's not a lot of surprises there. And every week it's great for Saquon. Pretty much every week it's great for AJ Brown. When Devontae Smith isn't in there, we know it's going to be pretty good for Dallas Goedert. He got home. Just a very impressive team overall.
I feel like there's not too much more to say about the Eagles, right? Saquon eventually just gets his. Like I said, I think they're the best team in football. On the Ravens side of things, I'm not gonna raise the panic alarm too much over this performance against the Eagles, just like I didn't want to freak out against their performance or with their performance against the Steelers recently either, because I think this is one of the best defenses in the league. Like your offense goes up against a really tough defense, and they have great players on offense that can win them the game. This stuff is going to happen. 2 things though do concern me with where the Ravens are right now. One, I do think that Rashad Bateman was ruled out of this game with a knee injury, and obviously that hurts me personally. I also think it hurts the Ravens from a football standpoint, because even though Bateman didn't play or was ruled out of this game, I don't think Deontay Johnson played a snap in this game, or at least for large portions of the game, he did not participate. Nelson Aguilar let what was a beautiful throw from Lamar Jackson late in the second half go through his grasp, of course. And then we also have to talk about the Justin Tucker stuff, Andy. I know I normally try to quiet your kicker agenda, but for a moment here, I think we have to discuss it because this is going to be one of the raging stories in the NFL. 2 things here on Justin Tucker. This is from Bill Barnwell of ESPN. Justin Tucker has now missed as many or more kicks today than he missed in the 2012, 2013, 2016, 2017, 2019, or the 2021 NFL season. So that was just today. This is not just a today issue for Justin Tucker, but again, to put a point on how tough this was in this moment, from Next Gen Stats, the Ravens lost 28.4% in win probability across Justin Tucker's field goal and extra point attempts today. The miss is there. So he missed from 47, 53, and an extra point. Tough, really tough with the Justin Tucker stuff. And John Harbaugh said after the game, they're committed to Tucker. They're not going to make a change there. I don't know, man. That's tough. This is probably 2 games recently where they can, maybe not directly, but they can certainly at least raise an eyebrow at the Justin Tucker stuff in terms of them losing these games.
Yeah, this is one where, commonly in, certainly in Major League Baseball and many other sports, you would find an injury for Justin Tucker, right? Like you would put Justin Tucker on the shelf for a little while. This was, they lost the game by 5 points and he missed 2 field goals that are certainly historically well within his range. He misses an extra point. Clear frustration on the field. I also he's a veteran, but he's also he's 35. He's not, great kickers can kick until they're 40. That's not, I was
going to say, I remember John
unusual.
Casey on these Panthers teams I grew up watching kicking until he was freaking your age, man. What are we talking about here?
So this isn't, this doesn't feel like it should be a father time situation, right? Like this seems like I don't have an explanation for why. I know earlier in the season, Justin Tucker talked about it being a mechanical issue. And obviously the world of kickers is almost unknowable to people who don't live in it, right? I don't even know what the mechanics of successful 60-yard kicks. I don't know what that is. It's totally unrelatable, but man, it's a terrible situation for Harbaugh too, right? Because he's freaking Justin Tucker. He's a likely Hall of Fame bound kicker. You can't just I don't know. I make it sound so easy that you can just find an injury for him and put him on IR or not have him active for some period of time. But man, it is very tough to watch, and it is an extremely difficult and very present problem for Baltimore.
Yeah, I'm trying to imagine what's worse for Baltimore. What's worse? Do you think them cutting Tucker and just being like, yo, dude, sorry, but we're trying to win the Super Bowl this year. Okay. And we're, by the way, we're an offensive team. We need to score points. We can't just leave however many points on the field every single week. Thank you for your services. Appreciate it. We cut you. We move on. We bring in insert random kicker off the street here. And that dude misses big kicks in the playoffs, and then every goofball that's a hindsight bro is going to be, hey, well, you cut the best kicker in franchise history, this legendary Hall of Fame figure. Way to go. What a terrible mistake. Or you just walk through the rest of the season with Justin Tucker doing this stuff, and then everybody looks back and again in hindsight but still says, what were you thinking? All the evidence is on the field right now.
You also have to have supreme confidence in the guy that you bring into the building too, right?
Yeah, right.
If there were a rock solid, can't miss kicker out there, he would be on a roster right now. So it's a dice roll no matter what you do. And somebody who comes in late in the season in December to replace Justin freaking Tucker is under about as much stress as a kicker can be under, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's tough. But again, still feel okay, not super panicky about the Ravens. I just feel so great about where the Eagles are at this point. Yeah. Let's move on to the next game here. A big NFC battle. Vikings 23, Cardinals 22. I feel like there's a lot to say about the Cardinals, but let's start on the Vikings here. I'm going to make this point in the next game too, that for a large parts of the day, Andy, I felt like Sam Darnold and Kirk Cousins were secretly playing a competition with each other in terms of who can be more late on the vast majority of their throws. However, one of these guys in Sam Darnold, you would know that just by looking at the box score, because the box score actually ended up being pretty great for Sam Darnold. There were so many plays where I thought he was late, but Justin Jefferson kind of bailed him out. Or hey, I'm Sam Darnold and I still have a very enticing physical skill set, which we'll get to the Kirk Cousins stuff of this in the next game here. Not so much the case there. So again, I don't really know what my point is by that, but that was sort of my reaction to watching Sam Darnold play in this game.
To your point, was it Greg Olsen doing this game? I think it was Greg Olsen doing this game, right? So. He called out instances where thank heavens Justin Jefferson came back to the football in a really strong manner, or it's either picked off or it's knocked to the ground, right? Justin Jefferson makes your team better in more ways than just what yardage expresses. He had a terrific game, and you're totally right to call out Darnold's somewhat shaky day. And like the box score looks just, except for the 5 sacks, box score looks just fine. Over 200 yards, a couple of touchdowns. I don't know. I don't even want to say get right game for Justin Jefferson because he didn't need one. I mean, Justin Jefferson is somebody who, like we talked about it a week ago, in that Bears game was a dominant figure because he was attracting, like, sometimes more than 2 people, right? Like he just has a sort of gravity that most receivers don't have, and it reshapes the field. And so he can have a dominant day while not actually putting up numbers, right? And so I don't want to say it was a get right game but people who have been, I don't know, just search his name on your social platform of choice, and you'll see people complaining about Justin Jefferson, and it's, obviously it's not warranted. He finishes with 99 yards here.
Can I just say though, Andy, sorry to cut you off there, but like, number one, I saw those tweets happening today, and I think they will probably continue to happen, even if I agree with you. But he's still, just bottom line, people are going to be upset that he only scored 13.4 half PPR points in this game, which is actually below his season average coming into this one.
Tough break for folks who have to live with 7 for 99 from Justin Jefferson on a day when he was probably a lot better than his quarterback. They pull out another like late, I don't want to say improbable win because I didn't think Arizona was particularly impressive today. But this was one of those close games where I'm not sure it was a great game. I'd suggested that at the top, but it was certainly close and it was certainly fun. Wild ride for Aaron Jones too, who scores the go-ahead touchdown, but is super fumbly all of a sudden.
Yeah, that was another point that Greg Olson made. He said sometimes great players just have bad games, and this looked like it was just a bad game from Aaron Jones. That being said, though, one thing I think is kind of a through line. You said this was a close game, maybe not a great game. I think just one point we should acknowledge coming out of this one is that I think these are 2 of the better defenses in the NFL right now. And I say that because I do think Arizona needs to be grouped into that department. Like we still, I think in fantasy circles, view them as kind of this also ran unit, that they were very generous at the beginning of the season. But much like Minnesota, they play a bunch of, funky coverages. They don't send a ton of blitzes, things like that, but they can just throw a lot at you from a defensive standpoint. And with a guy like, maybe a better quarterback can just absolutely shred them. But of recent weeks, they have definitely performed much better from a defensive standpoint. A lot of that, like, weird stuff that they did last year and in early parts of this year is actually starting to turn into, I'm not saying they're one of the best defenses in the league necessarily, but they are an above average unit, I think, right now. So coming out of this game, I don't want to have these big, like, oh no, sort of panicky takeaways with either offense really, because I think this was a tough defensive test overall.
No, that's a really fair point. And they are both good defenses, especially Minnesota, in the way that, like, they're going to give up some yards, but they're going to also create chaos and confusion, and they're going to force some moments where the opposing quarterback maybe 3 or 4 times a game maybe doesn't know what he's looking at and makes a really, really poor choice. And that definitely happened today.
All right, let's talk about the Cardinals side of this thing. First of all, I do think we got to get out of the way that this was a tough game for Jonathan Gannon. I think very rarely do I come out of the Cardinals games thinking like, oh man, they kind of got out coached, which if you get out coached by Kevin O'Connell, no shame in that. I think the Vikings coaching staff is one of the best in the league because they have Brian Flores on defense as well. And I think they're just a really, really, really well run offense. But some of the in-game decision making for Jonathan Gannon was pretty tough. This tweet from @Theo_Mackey. Jonathan Gannon made 3 consecutive conservative decisions today that ESPN analytics disagreed with, not including the PAT up 12. So there were several like 4th down situations where he just like 4th and 2, very 4th and short situations, 4th and 4 late in the game where he kicked it when he probably should have gone for it. Just didn't seem like he trusted his offense. That being said, Andy, very shaky performance, I think, from Arizona's offense. Like I said, Vikings are a tough defense to play against. They actually threw a lot more man coverage than they usually do at this Cardinals team. So I get why maybe just they weren't quite ready tendency-wise, but this felt like a great... You mentioned the Arizona volatility on FFL this morning, and this felt like a game that really perfectly made that point for you.
Yeah, it actually felt like the volatility, like we saw it within the scope of one game. You know, the way I was referencing it this morning was that, man, we either get 25 fantasy points from Kyler Murray, we get like 11, and there's not a lot of but like there's literally no in between this year. And then here we had a game that felt, at times like, wow, this is a really impressive Cardinals team, and the defense has obviously played well now for at least a month. And they have some offensive playmakers, and they've figured out who those guys are, and they've figured out some good ways to get them the ball. And like, it's a big game for Trey McBride. They really fed him. It wasn't a huge game from Marvin Harrison, but they did feed him 12 targets, and he did find the end zone. Which was a promised scenario to us earlier in the week, so that was good to see. Connor was fine. I thought, Kyler threw a couple of picks. I don't even, the final pick is whatever. It's 4th and 10. You got to throw the ball, right? Wasn't a great ball, but it gets picked off. The other one though, the earlier pick was just a terrible ball, and reminiscent of the pick six against Seattle. Just an absolutely terrible ball. That floated a mile over his intended receiver and was just a very easy interception. And can't have those moments against great teams. Great teams. I don't know if I'm willing to put Minnesota in the great team conversation, but they got a bunch of great players, and they got a fun coaching staff.
Yeah, that's really well said. And I just think Kyler's Kyler. I think he's a volatile player. He's somewhere like just in that range of rankings. Like, I think his high moments get people to really buy into him, but I think his low moments also I think he's somewhere in between, like his best and his worst moments. He's just kind of constantly vacillating between his best and worst moments. So it's tough. Like, it's just tough to analyze this stuff because he is such an up and down player. And I think Marvin Harrison's a little bit of an up and down player at this point, which is fine. He's a rookie wide receiver. He can get better in the areas that he's not that great at, but it does feel like every game has to sort of be this like microcosm of who he is as a player. And that I'm not totally down with, just because I think there are strengths of his game. There are weaknesses of his game. Like, I do find it funny that every time it seems like he comes up with a big catch, it's an in-breaking or an out-breaking, like, intermediate route, short to intermediate route, and every time it's like a missed connection, it's a go route down the field, it's a back shoulder ball, where it just seems like these two guys are not on the same page, or he's not perfectly open. So I don't know. There's a lot of volatility here. The one consistent part of this Cardinals passing game is Trey McBride, as you mentioned, who, according to Next Gen Stats, becomes the first tight end in NFL history to have 12 receptions in back-to-back games.
Oh my gosh. And he cannot find the end zone to save his life, which is wild. And he keeps coming up just short too. So obviously that's going to happen at some point. And he's a high volume guy and a really talented player. So it's not like we're worried about Trey McBride. He's just seeing, only Brock Bowers is seeing this kind of volume. So it's pretty great. Like, just to your earlier point about Kyler, he's been around too long to have, like, this level of volatility and to have this many, sort of negative plays over the course of a game and over the course of a season. Not just like, oh, that throw got away from him, but like, wow, that was a killer throw that swung this entire game. That's what's happening. And I don't know, you're a veteran now. Like, this isn't, I don't know, guys get old in a hurry. It's not that he's old, but he's been around long enough that you'd like to think that the floor would be higher on a week to week basis for Kyler. Yeah.
The tough problem is that he has maybe not every game, but he has at least a handful of plays throughout the course of the season where it's like, well, they probably don't win that game without that play by Kyler Murray. Yeah, so I see why he's so intoxicating as a figure. Yeah. All right. Let's go to the next game here. Chargers 17, Falcons 13. Man, I don't really. Where the hell do we want to start on this one, Andy? Do we want to go with the Falcons? Do we want to go with the Chargers? I feel like there's probably a little bit more to say about the Falcons here.
I think we actually have kind of a lot of yikes on both sides.
Yes. Yeah.
This was not, this isn't like a feel good win for the Chargers exactly. Obviously, it is the Atlanta doesn't even look like a playoff team right now. Bijan Robinson is having a crazy year, and he's one of the most exciting players in the league. And this was another just remarkable game from him. And it just goes to waste. Cousins was just a beat slow on a bunch of throws. And of course you have to credit the Chargers for this as well, right? Like, there were a couple throws where he like double, triple clutched, still put the ball in the air, and you just knew it was going to get picked. before you could even see the receiver or the defense or anybody else, right? I didn't need to see it to know that ball was getting picked off. At a certain point, like you were just rooting for the ball to get to the intended receiver out of Cousins' hand. They're jumping all kinds of routes, sitting on throws, and it was working. 4 interceptions, just a really, really ugly day from Kirk Cousins, to the point that you had an awful lot of people, some of them like, serious NFL reporters, wondering if it might be Michael Penix's time, right? And it didn't seem like a crazy question on the day. Cousins was a really, really rough watch. And I don't know, all the other playmakers were fine. Again, Bijan Robinson was a miracle worker several times, and it just didn't matter.
Touchdown interception ratio is not everything, but over the last 3 games for the Atlanta Falcons, all 3 losses, by the way, Kirk Cousins has 0 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, and it feels like it, folks, especially today, because Andy, you perfectly said this. He was just, it's tough when me, like, goofball in chief, just some dude in his home office, has never played quarterback in any professionally, collegiate, any level. Okay. I'm the most embarrassing, like, flag football quarterback of all time. Okay. Give me a break. I'm not even that great of a kickball player. All right. So that's where we're at. That's where we're at with me and my quarterbacking skills. I'm not a useless athlete, but certainly useless from a quarterbacking standpoint. It's tough when I'm at home sitting like late, like to throw after throw with Cousins here. And I think it's sometimes, I think it's because he's late. And then also I do feel like, can he even drive the football right now? Which is, I mean, you mentioned Bijan Robinson. Some of these are like miracle plays by him. Shoot, some of these Drake London catches, which 9 for 16 here, they've got to be absolute miracle catches to gain like 8 yards. That's a really tough way to live, which is why I think we're seeing the Penix stuff come from a variety of different circles. It's just one of those things that, yeah, I mean, the Falcons might lose the playoff spot to Tampa Bay, who they've beaten twice this year. That would be humiliating if that's the case. They lose out a playoff spot in the NFC South to Tampa Bay, who they've beat twice. And it's like, if that happens, is Kirk Cousins even coming back next year? I have no idea. You're probably going to play the young dude that you drafted 8th overall. So I get why the Penix chatter is there. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I get why people are throwing it out there.
I believe Scott Pianowski tweeted it today. I don't have the tweet in front of me, but the general point was, Kirk Cousins has like 8 touchdown passes this year against Tampa Bay, and like he's seen that like really, really soft zone a couple times. He's picked it apart. Great games. That's like all of his fantasy production. He had another pretty good game against Dallas, and every other week he's like the QB 22 through QB 28, right? Like, it's not. All of the good stuff has happened in the Tampa Bay games, and you're not going to get them again.
Nope, you're not. And this is a defense. I don't have the coverage data in front of me, but this is a defense that plays a lot of zone coverage in Los Angeles. They play more zone coverage than almost anyone else. So for Kirk not to be able to sit back there and just kind of pick that apart, that's pretty troubling, because I think those windows were closing really, really fast. And you just felt like some of the issues there. So, I feel like the ceiling on this offense just ticks down every single week. And I don't know if that's going to change. You mentioned on the other side that this doesn't exactly come out of here. We don't come out of here feeling like, oh, wow, the Chargers, great. Mostly because I tweeted this during the game. In the stoppable force versus movable object matchup of the day, the Falcons pass rush had an edge on the Chargers interior pass protection, Andy. And like, the Falcons haven't had a good pass rush. Forget in the time I've been covering the league or whatever the hell it is I'm doing here. Dude, they've like barely had a good pass rush in my freaking lifetime, my time here on planet Earth. And this group this year might be the worst I've seen. They come into week 13, the Falcons do, with 10 sacks. They got 5 on Justin Herbert today. They have 50% of their season-long pass rush production from a sack standpoint against these Chargers, which this has been an issue for the Chargers all year long. And then the fact, Andy, that they have one dude who's like a good pass catcher at this point. Ladd McConkey, 117 of Justin Herbert's 147 yards. The fact that none of these guys on the outside can really get open, it's like exacerbating the pressure issue here.
McConkey with 9 catches. Nobody else with more than 2. Quentin Johnson had 2. and a bunch of guys had one, and the guys who all had one didn't do anything with them. Like it was really like this was a total one-man show, aside from Justin Herbert. Obviously 5 sacks is just unacceptable against that defense, and there's 1 million sacks on the season now for Herbert. So that, I mean, that's just and we've seen them run into some pretty legit teams lately. Not that Atlanta's one of them, and haven't always passed the eye test. So that, I feel like a lot of people were getting, I don't know, myself included. I was kind of wowed by the Chargers defense for a lot of this season. It got exposed a little bit, in some tougher matchups, and man, they do not look like a team that is going to make some kind of deep playoff run.
Yeah.
They looked just good enough to beat Atlanta, which is not particularly impressive right now. Didn't get a whole lot out of the run game, and it was a good setup for Gus Edwards replacing J.K. Dobbins this week. I do think that you kind of see that, Dobbins isn't a perfect back necessarily, and he's had some up and down games, but he's a great safety valve as a receiver, and they didn't have a lot of that element this week, and maybe we get a little bit more of that with Vidal in the weeks ahead, but not a ton of Kamani Vidal in this one. Gus Edwards just 6 carries for 32 yards, which is fine, but they didn't feed him, and he's not. Again, he's pretty challenged when we have to throw the ball.
Yeah. It's a great point about Dobbins as a safety valve there. And look, all this is fine, by the way. Like if Kirk Cousins was average in this game, the Falcons might have blown away the Chargers just based on some of those issues there, which again, all of this is fine. I think the Chargers are ahead of schedule, and I actually think they're a really good team. They're a team I really enjoy watching. Maybe they're not a really good team, but they're a team I really enjoy watching. I like the brand of football they play on both sides of the ball. Like, that's all great. They're not supposed to be this good right now. Maybe next year they can really, with a good foundation, a good culture in place, and Justin Herbert and Ladd McConkey, who, by the way, McConkey has to like scrape himself off the field after every single catch seemingly. Yeah. It's kind of tough again when that's the only guy you can rely on, and you also don't want to grind him into the dirt. So yeah, a lot to say about the Chargers, but I think that this was not a great performance from them, but it's been a pretty good season based on the expectations for this team coming in. So I do still enjoy watching the Chargers overall. Let's toss to our first break. When we come back, we'll get through the games we sort of care about right after this. All right, we're back. Andy, I mentioned those Buccaneers. They barely got by the Panthers today, which, depending on how you feel about the Panthers, I'm not sure if that is a big compliment or a big insult, but Buccaneers 26, Panthers 23. What had your eye in this one?
Yeah, I don't think it's an insult because the Panthers are pretty frisky, right? They gave the Chiefs, the Chiefs will obviously play a very tight game with anybody, literally anybody in the league, but they gave them a game. Now they gave the Bucs a game. I thought, I don't want to exaggerate it too much, but I feel like Bryce Young is just a wholly different player from the guy that we saw in the opening weeks of this season, certainly than the guy that we saw last season. Like, making plays with confidence, doesn't always show up in the box score. I thought he was, for the most part, better than his receivers today. He calmly got them out of some thorny situations. Like, he just seems like a lot more mature and self-assured than he was earlier in the season. Obviously, this is a very friendly defense. We just talked about the fact that Kirk Cousins has like all of his fantasy points against this Bucs defense this season. So little bit of that, but man, this is just another really encouraging game from Bryce Young, and another game that, they managed to get it to overtime. They managed like a late go-ahead score. That was exciting. So impressive performance there. I thought Thielen looked really good. He had one touchdown. He had that go-ahead touchdown catch, and probably had a second touchdown catch, but replay didn't agree. That's about as close to a vintage performance as I think we're going to get from Thielen. So overall, like, I think the Panthers are relatively impressive. The Bucs are really fun, and like it felt like the wheels were coming off for the Bucs at various points in this game. Baker Mayfield was down on the field for a while. We got a little Kyle Trask for a minute there. So Baker hurting, limping around, Bucky Irving limping around, but still finishes with over 150 rushing yards and looked great. Scored a touchdown. So man, like the one-handed Mike Evans catch too. It feels like forever ago because it was the start of the game, but what a just absolutely beautiful reception. So they got a lot of talent. thank goodness. Like, you could have just canceled this season for me if Baker Mayfield had gone out like that. He's been so fun to watch. Even, and he, again, this is another day where he was far from perfect, but man, he keeps coming. He's got just sort of that, like, I don't know, weird Rocky heavyweight mentality thing where he'll make a bunch of mistakes, but you just can't knock him off. Like, he just keeps coming. So he was fun. They pull out a win and they look, I don't know, I think you said it earlier, like, it's wild what Atlanta has actually done to the Bucs this year, but the Bucs look so much better right now.
Yeah, there were so many moments where it's just like, oh, this is it for Tampa. Right.
Yes.
The Baker Mayfield injury, the brutal interception he throws right after coming back. It's like, oh, great, Baker's back. I mean, producer Colin in our little group chat, he's like, yikes, Kyle Trask era is off to a tough start. I'm like, no, that was Baker Mayfield. You might have missed it because it was like Kyle Trask was just in there, but no, that was Baker that threw that hideous interception. He also took a disgusting sack when you just like can't take a sack in overtime, which then turned the ball back to the Panthers because McLaughlin missed a field goal. And then, I mean, just luckily, not luckily because, hey, it's good on you to strip the football, but like Chuba Hubbard, who's just been so good for the Panthers this year, just makes a mistake, carries the ball with one hand and gets the ball stripped from him. And he was even like trying to think about containing it, but you got to have two hands on the ball in that situation. And Hubbard was like lingering on the benches long after the game was over, eventually loses that one. Just tough for a player that has been so good for this team. But yeah, I mean, there were some moments where, and you mentioned Bucky Irving, who 25 carries, 152 yards and a touchdown. He looks like he's going to win people fantasy leagues if you have him. And he's been a player that Andy's talked about all year long. So hopefully you do have him. He was limping on and off the field. He's like, oh no, this is it for Tampa. But they do eventually get out with a win here.
Yeah. I believe it was a hip issue for Irving. And like, it actually had him limping. I don't know how he came back with the second half that he had. But he's obviously tremendous every week, and it was great to see this workload. But it's going to be worth following the practice reports this week for him.
Yeah, and just before we move on from the Panthers, I really I don't want to do a whole thing on it because we got to keep the show moving. But I really thought several times during the course of this game for Bryce Young, just even early on in the contest, like the first few drives, I'm like, there are several plays he is making that he just never made, and you couldn't even imagine the player that he was last year making some of these plays, especially the way the touchdown to Thielen was just a beautiful throw, and it's not as if he had guys draped all over him, but the pocket was muddy, and he responded, moved around, adjusted, and just ripped the ball down the field. Find me the plays where he did that last year. Just didn't happen. Find me the plays where he was responding to pressure in muddy pockets at the beginning of the season. They just don't exist. I especially him using his athleticism too, because it's not like he's Kyler Murray or any of these guys, but he can move around a little bit. He has like certainly functional athleticism, and you've just seen that so much more. I just feel like he is developing before our eyes. Whether he becomes like a superstar quarterback or anything like that, he's doing a lot of very high end stuff right now, I think.
Yeah, he had a couple moments today where he very calmly sorted through things. Even in plays that resulted in incompletions and throwaways, very calmly sorted through things, got himself out of the pocket, made the throwaway, no negative play. We're on to second down or whatever. And like, even those situations for a young quarterback often, end in them trying to make plays that they should not try to make. And he wasn't doing too much. He's also, these last couple of weeks, he's made some layered, deep downfield throws that we just have not seen a lot from him to this point, if at all. So it's been there are only a handful of stories across the league where somebody looks, and Bo Nix is one of them, and Bryce Young is one of them, where they just look like an entirely different athlete in November compared to where they were in September.
All right, next game up here, Steelers 44, Bengals 38. I just feel like both these teams, Andy, were like the meme of themselves in this game. You've got the Bengals putting up 38 points and they lose the game. and basically trailed throughout the entire proceeding. And man, the Steelers, Russell Wilson throws up 400 yards, 3 touchdowns. George Pickens is absolutely wilding out in this game, both from a plays made and mistakes made, and just again wild moments to where Mike Tomlin's saying in the postgame presser he has to grow up, which he probably does have to grow up at this point. But again, these two teams were basically, like I said, the meme of themselves in this one.
I loved this game. I had this on the primary screen in the early window. Man, this thing was fun. Where to start? Cincinnati. Cincinnati is now 2-4 in games in which they have scored 30 points. That's crazy. Like, that's crazy. First of all, you've scored 30 points in 6 games. You should be a great team, right? They are 2-4 of those, 2-4 in those games. That is just absolutely wild. And Burrow, of course, post game, like talking about the pressure that he feels to be basically the perfect version of himself every time they take the field. I mean, it just feels so like any time they don't score on a drive is just such a blow to Cincinnati because they're just hemorrhaging points. I mean, you give up 44 to Pittsburgh. Well, I thought Russell Wilson had, like, I don't know, this was a great Russell Wilson game. He, obviously everything downfield was working. I think PFF tweeted that he was 6 of 7 on throws, traveling 15 plus yards downfield. They all hit 160 plus yards, a couple touchdowns. He finishes with over 400 yards. He was great. But again, it's, Cincinnati. But it's just good to see that Russell can beat a friendly matchup this badly. This was the perfect George Pickens game. This was like the platonic ideal of a George Pickens game. You got the incredible play that resulted in a touchdown, bunch of highlights. Sometimes the highlight and the low light were the same play. Sometimes he would do something absolutely incredible and then finish it with a personal foul flag. It was just, I mean, this is the full George Pickens experience packed into a single game. It was marvelous. I have no notes for him. It was perfect. It's probably what we're going to get the rest of the year. I don't know. Maybe there's a date far in the future where we'll get a version of George Pickens that is fully matured and never does this stuff. But I'll kind of miss this George Pickens. I'd feel differently if I were a Steelers fan, but just as an impartial observer, I love it. Had a great time watching him.
Yeah, like I said, Mike Tomlin after the game, who, by the way, congrats to Mike Tomlin. He has 18 consecutive seasons without a losing record. The only with more is Tom Landry with 21, Bill Belichick with 19. So yeah, he's in great company, of course. But again, he did say after the game, he being George Pickens has got to grow up. But it is wild stuff out there with what's going on with George Pickens. I mean, this is like. At one point he had 5 targets, 3. This is from Underdog Fantasy. 5 targets, 3 receptions, 74 yards and a touchdown, 1 unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, 1 taunting penalty. It's just like these are the stats we're keeping on George Pickens, and I get it. So just like the platonic ideal of a George Pickens game and the platonic ideal of these two teams all wrapped into one. Let's move on to the next one here. Colts 25, Patriots 24. It's the Patriots. I get it. People are going to immediately respond with that. But I thought this was a pretty important game for Anthony Richardson, Andy.
Yeah, no, I agree. Because it was overall a pretty shaky game. And then you make all the key plays down the stretch, right? And it, felt a little bit like the Jets game in that regard. We I kind of talked myself into the idea that Jets win could be a springboard for Richardson. This was good to see. Not a great day as a passer. So he only completes 12 throws. It's going to be really hard rest of season for anybody to be a valuable receiver, maybe other than Josh Downs, if the possibility still exists that we're, that Richardson is going to be a guy who completes 10, 12 passes a game. That's really tough, but great finish for him. Great, great game winning drive. That was really fun. I thought Drake May played well again. Fantasy wise, you can really feel good about Drake May because you just have to, like, especially if you're a dynasty manager, you just got to think ahead to the time that they actually have like a real receiving core.
Average.
I don't mean to be like super disrespectful though. Like, I don't know, Hunter Henry is our leading receiver again. That's not great. Austin Hooper is our number 2 receiver. Like, that's just not, we need the young receivers to mature and play better. We probably need to add somebody to that room. But you can, you don't have to like squint too hard to see how Drake May could be a really impactful fantasy quarterback down the road.
Oh yeah, I just like get this guy T. Higgins, get him some, just keep taking swings in the draft. You probably missed on Jalen Polk. Maybe Javon Baker never turns in anything. Who cares? Just keep taking swings at the receiver position, because this guy is just showing so much promise in what is just a bad situation. I mean, the offensive line stinks too. And I think Drake May threw what would have been a big touchdown pass late in this game to Kendrick Bourne, but that got called back due to an illegal formation or shift or something like that. So this is an equally promising game for Drake May, as I do think it is for Anthony Richardson, which you trust me, watch a bunch of this game. You could definitely still do the cut ups of like Adonai Mitchell leaving plays on the field, Drew Ogletree leaving plays on the field. I mean, there were some rough drops for the Colts, like with the completion percentage stuff. I get that. I mean, who cares? Like, honestly, don't even care about that stuff. What matters really to me is that he leads them on a 19-play, 80-yard drive with 5 minutes and 22 seconds left in the game. I thought his touchdown throw to just simple outbreaker to Alec Pierce was a pinpoint throw to a guy in Alec Pierce who's not the model of separation and consistency himself. Certainly not on those types of plays, just like quick outbreakers, things like that. And they just have leaned into him so much more as a design rusher, including Shane Steichen, I think, having the faith in Anthony Richardson to say, hey, we're putting the ball in your hands on a design rush attempt on the 2-point conversion to win the game. And that's exactly what happened. So to me, I just think it's only 3 games. I have no idea if like Richardson's going to become a franchise quarterback or anything, but I'm so beyond like the benching conversation and things like that. I think that Steichen handled the messaging around that poorly. But I think they've handled the 3 games after that, leaning into so much of this design rush stuff. Like 6 carries of his 9 were designed runs today, according to Next Gen Stats. And he's had 16 designed runs in the previous 2 weeks, average 5.5 yards per carry. So they've just done so much to, I think, make him an effective real life quarterback. And also that's going to help him in fantasy as well. Yeah.
The final drive again, just a real feel good series for him. I feel like, as you're talking a little bit about, we probably, I'm sure we harp too much on the completion stats and completion percentage for Richardson, and it has been an issue. And certainly, like, there were opportunities that receivers did not pull in this one. Some of what has made such the Indianapolis offense such a difficult watch this year. It's really small, simple stuff that does not show up in never makes the game highlights. Right? It's like a handoff that they mangle, or it's a snap that Richardson doesn't take cleanly, and like that ends up in a short loss or something like that, but it just derails a drive. But like you don't see those things unless you're like watching these full games, and they don't make a lot of highlight reels. But man, when they put a drive together and there's not some hiccup in there where, again, it's a botched handoff or it's a snap that he doesn't quite corral and it loses 5 yards. When we could just have a drive that is absent any of those plays, things go really well.
Yeah, let's just be normal for a minute. Colts passing offense, and it's one of these things that, if you want to argue that most of this is not Anthony Richardson's fault, I think you can have ammo for that. If you want to argue like, hey, Richardson is not ever going to be a successful NFL quarterback, like as a consistent starter, I think every game gives you evidence on both sides. But because there is some real deal evidence that I think he's progressing and developing a little bit, and there are strengths of his game, I'd continue to like give it a shot, keep the coaching staff around next year, try to like just keep him growing and developing, and hopefully some of these younger players come along the way. Because man, it's crazy. Adonai Mitchell, obviously, I think people got excited about him in fantasy today. 0 catches on 2 targets. I saw Ian Hardis from Fantasy Life tweet this out, that has anyone ever seen Adonai Mitchell and Dontavian Wicks in the same room? I want to note that somebody in the Reception Perception Discord, I wish I could shout out their handle, not that anybody cares. Like people in Discord, shout out to this person. They were the one. They said this like a month ago. So Adonai Mitchell's just basically Dontavian Wicks. I was like, damn. When they said that like a month ago, I was like, this is a really good comparison. So that's just like
that really is.
Hopefully, some of these young guys can develop, and we get some more consistency there. Final game that we sort of care about: Seahawks 26, Jets 21. For this to be the game that the Jets lock in yet another losing season was just brilliant, Andy, because they had the lead in this one. They looked like they were going to control this. They were up 14-0 at the end of the first quarter. They were up 21-7 pretty like midway through the second quarter, until Leonard Williams, who used to play for the team, took a pick six back 92 yards. Leonard Williams is a freaking defensive lineman, and he was moving on that play. And they really got the lead, Andy, because Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams were just doing classic Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams stuff. And then it just all fell apart. And it's like, oh, well, none of this matters. And that's basically what this era of Jets football has felt like.
Oh yeah, that's so right. That's so well said. It was a nifty play by Williams. He dropped into coverage, right? Picked off a ball. Rodgers obviously fooled on the play, but it followed what had been like, I don't know, it felt like the happiest 20 minutes of Aaron Rodgers' season.
Yeah.
He's out there throwing blocks. He's smiling. He's interacting with young players on his own team in a friendly manner, which we just have not seen a lot from Aaron Rodgers this year. And then, of course, it all took a turn, as almost every Jets game has done this season. And we got, grim, surly Rodgers by the end of it. Not a particularly impressive game on the Seattle side necessarily, but they did enough against a deeply flawed team.
Deeply, deeply flawed team. Yeah, Jeff Ulbrich after the game answering questions about a quarterback change. And I had to stop and think to myself, what's more pointless, starting a 35-year-old Tyrod Taylor the rest of the way, or starting 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers, who it feels like there's a 0.0% chance he's back with the Jets next year as they're careening towards another like full-scale teardown. So I don't really know the answer to that, but the fact that we're even like having the interim head coach, by the way, answer these questions, it's a reminder of how ridiculous this whole season has been. Yeah, big. JSN leading receiver for Seattle. That's obviously something I cared about coming out of this game, so that was good to see.
DK Metcalf was quiet for a lot of this game and was, I think, probably this is not a primary game for me, but I would imagine he was being given fits by Sauce Gardner for a little while.
Also dealing with some injuries in this one as well.
Yeah, he missed a couple of days of practice earlier this week, and he's dealt with injuries all season. So I'm sure that is part of it. He still finishes with 66 yards. That's good to see. Zach Charbonnet rushing touchdown on a day when Kenneth Walker really needed some touchdown deodorant, as our friend Scott Pianowski would say, right? Like, tough day on the ground for him. AJ Barner touchdown. He looked pretty good. He's had a couple moments this season when he's flashed.
Yeah, I don't really know if Seattle is a good football team, but with Arizona's loss today, they're 7-5. They're leading the division. So hey, they've got a shot at this thing. They did not screw up and lose to the Jets, which for a minute there it looked like they might screw up and lose to the Jets. Shout out to Gino for the meme he posted after the game. If you haven't seen it, go check out his Twitter account. It's probably one of the best revenge game memes we've seen afterwards. So on that note, let's take the final break. We come back, we'll go run through the games we sort of care about and get any takeaways from the holiday games off our chest right after this. All right, Andy, we are back. We got 3 games that I think could have been an email, starting with Texans 23, Jaguars 20. My email to you, Andy, about the Texans here is, Dear Andy, I'm not saying that the Texans are a poorly coached team, but they sure as hell do a lot of things that poorly coached teams do, highlighted, of course, by what was a freaking unbelievable moment from Aziz Al-Shaair, who obliterates Trevor Lawrence on a play where he hits him late and high when he's sliding, just things you can't do. Daryl Johnson basically, took him to the cleaners, like saying what a dishonorable thing this was to do. And what might have been even crazier was the way Al-Shaair behaved afterwards when he's like trying to start fights with everybody, including fans, when he's so clearly in the wrong. And this isn't even his first like offense this year, which D'Amico Ryan's like, oh, that's just not really what defines him as a player. I'm like, I don't know, dude, kind of does.
Yeah, it is now the defining play of his career. Incredibly dirty hit, and not really like a bang bang situation either, where a quarterback is just starting to go down. Trevor Lawrence was well into his slide, and he sized him up and hit him with like a forearm in the face. Just a super dirty play that the Jaguars surrounding Lawrence responded in the only appropriate way, right? Yeah. Which was to go at him. And it, I don't know, kind of marred the whole game. The unnecessarily close game, by the way. Right. We had Mac Jones coming into this thing. I guess we don't know if Trevor Lawrence is going to play again this year. I'm not really sure what the he's already dealing with a
probably
shoulder
shouldn't even
injury,
playing
and now
in
he's
this
got the
game. He
concussion.
probably shouldn't even be playing in this game.
Yeah. So then we have like Mac Jones entering. Houston at one point, I don't know, I thought this game was well in hand, and then pretty soon it wasn't. For this thing to end up a 3-point game, I don't know. That's just how a lot of stuff goes for Houston. It seems. I mean, they now have. I mean, they're what are they? An 8-win team right now, comfortably in charge of the division. They're only like plus 20 on the season in point differential, which just, I don't know. They play a lot of unnecessarily close situations in close games. And this was yet another of them. Joe Mixon was great. Nico was great. Tank Dell, a little bit of a no-show. Otherwise, a relatively quiet game from CJ Stroud in what I had thought was going to be, maybe a blow-up spot for him. He needs one fairly desperately, fantasy-wise.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, the Texans make stupid mistakes. They take more penalties than almost anyone, which basically was the Azeez Al-Shaair situation in a nutshell. And they let bad teams hang around. I mean, 23-20 win over the mostly Mac Jones Jaguars. That's embarrassing. I really liked a lot of what D'Amico Ryans and Bobby Slowick did, even if I thought Slowick got a little overrated after their first season. I don't really like anything that's going on with this team right now at this point. So not sure what to do there. Yeah, I don't think we need to see Trevor Lawrence for the rest of the season, man. I mean, come on. Like that was tough. Brian Thomas gets a touchdown. He probably could have had another huge one if Mac Jones could have hit him appropriately, but it's just what's more important, Trevor Lawrence's like long-term viability or scraping out a few wins for your Brian Thomas fantasy teams. And one of my best fantasy teams has Brian Thomas. So I'm trying to be selfless about this too.
This thing where Houston just plays these unnecessarily close games, by the way, that goes back to September. Remember, like the Bears game where the whole internet had jokes about Caleb Williams in that game, and the Bears were terrible, and it was like a 6-point game. It was winnable late when the two teams did not even seem evenly matched, and maybe like they were not even equipped to play the same sport, and it was still a 1-score game. It's all they play.
Next game up here, Rams 21, Saints 14. The big news coming out of this one is obviously on the Saints side. The whole team is basically how much can Taysom Hill do for us? He gets carted off late in this game, which was definitely really unfortunate. The Riz God, Darren Rizzi, has given him a little bit of pop here for the New Orleans Saints. Marquez Valdes-Scantling catches a long touchdown every single week. Taysom Hill does so many different things, but the fact that Hill's probably, I don't know, again, he's carted off in this one. We don't know the full details at this point. That's not great. His
expression on the field, like, told you that he thought it was something pretty serious. So, that was really unfortunate. He's had I know I've had a lot of jokes about whether he's a tight end and what exactly he is and how he's this sort of weird hybrid player. But, he has had a really fun season and he's been a really fun fantasy ride. So you absolutely hate to see that. I have no idea what the Saints are. The Saints are like this weird AI generated team. I don't even like they have weeks where they have looked like the best damn team in the league. And then they've had fully embarrassing weeks where they no show. I don't know what they are. Like, and they're running out of talented players now. We're down to just Alvin Kamara.
Oh, well, they're just running out of players, period. I mean, they're even, I don't even know how many more talented players they have left. But yeah, it's a very strange season for the Saints and what's been a very strange era for the New Orleans Saints football team. On the Rams side of things here, I think the biggest fantasy story, beyond the fact that Cooper Kupp has a really poor showing in this one, is that Blake Corum and Kyren Williams were, for a long portion of this game, like splitting touches. That was a pretty big deal.
Super weird. Kyren Williams for a quarter of this game, the first quarter of this game, deep into the second quarter, looked very much like a third down back. There was a moment when Blake Corum had all of the running back care, like 5 carries for 32 yards, and Kyren Williams hadn't taken a carry yet. And then it all flipped, and Kyren Williams was Kyren Williams again, and he finishes with 100 yards and a touchdown, and it's fine. And I'd love to. I haven't heard Sean McVay's comments on that yet, but like early in this game, Blake Corum looked like I don't know, he looked like the featured back. He looked like the early down back. It was a nice proof of concept, actually. Like he ran well. Like the final line is nothing special, 42 rushing yards, but I don't know. It looked pretty good with Blake Corum back there, and I think you actually, we've talked about him as one of the premium running backs to stash, and just in case something happens to the starter. And I thought today was a very clear demonstration that if anything were to happen to Kyron Williams, Blake Corum could certainly step in and be a top 12, top 15 fantasy running back.
Final game here that could have been an email. Commanders 42, Titans 19. This is the Matt Harmon transparency game of the week, where it's the one I saw the least of in the early window. Still have no idea how the hell Nick Westbrook-Akine is like third in the NFL in touchdown receptions with 2 more today. Have no idea how the Titans, who I've been saying, like, man, they dominate the line of scrimmage, especially on the interior. The Commanders' run game has been pretty rough for weeks. Well, they just barreled all over Tennessee in this one.
Yeah, there was a moment in this game where Washington was up 28-0, and Will Levis had 3 passing yards. A total no-show situation. I'm actually just looking now to see where time of possession ended in this one, because for a while I don't know what the all-time time of possession record was, but it seemed like Washington could get there because obviously Tennessee couldn't stay on the field, and Washington could do no wrong for a really, really long stretch in this game. Absolutely wild stuff. Yeah. So dominant performance by Washington. Terry McLaurin's great again, a couple of touchdowns. I will say I shouldn't need to, it's not like in Westbrook-Akine's defense, he's just having such a weird year, right? Like 20 catches and 8 touchdowns is not a thing that happens. That's like, once every 10 or 15 years from some super random tight end, somebody might do that. Like, this is just a crazy receiver season. But I will say today, 8 targets, and he played every snap. So you can at least look at him and say, man, there are more opportunities here than there would be in a normal Westbrook-Akine week. So I can see how you found the end zone in this one. It's been a minor miracle in a lot of other games, right, where he doesn't see like target totals that are anything like this. But now we're looking at, like, this is last 3 games, 19 targets. He's not coming off the field. We got 6 teams on bye in week 14, so you're probably squeezing him into lineups.
All right, we would typically end the show with some awards to give out, but in lieu of that this week, I just wanted to give us a little space here at the end of the show to do like a holiday game takeoff, which basically just, Andy, you got a take about the holiday games you need to get off your chest. Obviously, your team played on the holiday slate. We had 3 other games happen. Anything you got from those 4 games, you just need to get off. You got to get on a podcast record somewhere.
Well, you could have had a scathing take from me about the Bears if they had not made a move at the head coaching position, right? Like that pretty much had to happen after. And you can, like, we can blame all sorts of people for the way that game ended. 33 seconds to go, and you only get 1 play off, and it's a wild play, and you don't use your timeout. Like, Matt Eberflus actually takes his timeout into whatever this period of unemployment is. That was crazy. But we could blame Caleb for that because he's on the field at the controls of the offense. But man, I can't think of a time where I have seen an NFL head coach just purely become a curious onlooker. Like, I don't know, make a mistake. Like, I don't know, do the wrong thing emphatically, like a lot of bad coaches do, but don't just do nothing. Like, that was one of the wildest sequences that I think I've ever seen. The reporting on the players' reaction post game was, I don't know, as it should be. They felt like they had been let down by their coaching staff, which they were. Just a rough way to go out all around. I can't imagine Matt Eberflus is going to. Matt Eberflus has a nice history as an assistant and as a defensive coach, and I'm sure he will return to it. It's really hard to imagine him stepping into another head coach role anytime soon. Like that, all of Thanksgiving was basically dominated unfortunately by the Bears for me.
Yeah, it was tough. That was a tough scene between like Caleb just getting up to the line of scrimmage, doing all this stuff. It's like, well, hey, what are we doing here? And maybe there should be like somebody whose job it is to be the head of the operation here. We might even call that guy the head coach. I don't know.
Yeah.
What are we doing? Otherwise, like, honestly, I feel like the Thanksgiving slate, like, script writers maybe be a little more original. After that, I feel like they went so kind of crazy with that ending to the Bears-Lions game that I felt as if the rest of the 3 games went exactly to plan. Giants, Cowboys with Drew Lock in the mix tried to set completion percentage back a decade. Like Anthony Richardson looked at that game and blushed. The Dolphins looked embarrassing in the cold to the point that Mike McDaniel's like, his little nosy is red in his halftime interview because this team is so bad playing in the cold. Jaden Reed scores 2 touchdowns, doesn't get any yards. Like, come on, like, don't be so, but bad pun intended, don't be so on the nose there. And then the Chiefs pull out a ridiculous late game win against the Raiders team that, like, there were several times, this is my take to get off here. There were several times during that Raiders game where I was like, if they had a real quarterback, I think this offense would be okay. And maybe that was just way too much food, maybe a little bit too much alcohol the day before. But I was like, you got Jacoby Myers, you got Brock Bowers making plays. Yeah. You got random running backs like finally doing something for this offense. This offensive line's like, okay. I feel like if you dropped a real deal quarterback, and O'Connell's fine. I think he's the best quarterback that's played for them this year. Whoop-de-doo, damning with faint praise. But I was like, you could get something out of this team here.
Yeah, I think they have the Bucks coming up too, right? So, like, I don't know, McConnell coming off 300-yard day against the Chiefs. You got a friendly matchup with the Bucks on the schedule. He's the guy throwing to Myers and Bauer. I don't know. It's good. It's a good situation, especially with 6 teams on bye. It's funny that like that the Raiders were in the situation they were in, and still it never feels like the Chiefs are going to lose. Like that was the least surprising outcome. Even though I'm sure win probability for the Raiders at a certain point in that game was outrageously high, it still would have been shocking if they'd actually drilled that field goal and gotten the playoff.
Yeah, at least according to our site, 62% with with like no time left on the clock for that game for the Raiders. So pretty wild stuff. But all right, with that, Andy, hell of a show. Like I said, the Thanksgiving slate, it was fun. I enjoyed watching it, but just the originality of it, not great. We won't wait too heavy-handed with the craziness with the Bears. We gotta dial things back here. Let's stick to the script for the rest of the games. The script's not real, people. Get out of my mentions about that. But otherwise, great week 13. That's gonna do it for us. Andy, shout out to you. We will see you again later this week for the preview show. For tomorrow, Dalton Del Don joins me for the final People's Panic Meter. Okay, this is the last time we give you guys a chance to tell us the players that you're panicking about. And so, definitely the more forward-thinking late season runs, this can be the best. So send in your panic to fantasymailbag@yahoosports.com. We'll handle all of that stuff then. Until tomorrow, we are out.